Time. It is the framework of our existence. From the moment we wake up to the ticking of the clock that lulls us to sleep, time governs everything we do. But how we understand time is far from universal. It's a construct that has changed dramatically throughout history. Today, our lives are bound by a system of 12 months, divided neatly into weeks, days, hours. Yet, for much of human history, time was something very different. In fact, the way we perceive time today may have distanced us from the natural world and even from the rhythms of the cosmos. What if the calendar we use now, the rigid system of 12 months and 365 days, is a departure from an older, more organic understanding of time? What if, instead of living by the mechanical clock, we return to the cycles of nature, where time ebbs and flows with the movements of the moon, the seasons, and the stars? But this isn't just a question about numbers on a page. This is about something much deeper, our perception of reality. So let's go back to the beginning and explore the ancient systems of timekeeping, how they shaped human culture, and what it means that we have moved away from them. Perhaps by revisiting these lost systems, we can better understand not just time, but life itself. To understand why we measure time the way we do today, we first need to look at how ancient civilizations did it. Early humans had no need for calendars like ours, but they were deeply attuned to the natural rhythms around them. Long before clocks, they understood time by observing the heavens, watching the sun rise and set, the moon wax and wane, and the stars shift across the night sky. These were the original markers of time, rooted in the cycles of nature. The earliest calendars were lunar. For ancient people, the moon's cycle, waxing from new to full and then waning back to new again, was a visible and reliable way to track time. It took roughly 29. 5 days for the moon to complete one cycle. So early civilizations organized their lives around these lunar months. The moon's phases became central to agriculture, festivals, and religious rites. One of the most famous lunar calendars was used by the Sumerians and Babylonians, who built entire systems around the moon. Their calendar consisted of 12 lunar months, each beginning with the first sighting of the crescent moon. But there was a problem. A lunar year made up of 12 cycles of the moon is only 354 days long, about 11 days shorter than the solar year. This mismatch created inconsistencies, especially in agricultural societies that needed to predict the seasons accurately. To correct this, they periodically added an extra month, called an intercalary month, to realign their calendar with the solar year. This practice of inserting extra time wasn't unique to Mesopotamia. Many early cultures, from the Chinese to the Greeks, grappled with the same dilemma. As civilizations grew more complex, some began to favor solar calendars over lunar ones. Solar calendars are based on the Earth's journey around the Sun, which takes approximately 3,525 days. The Egyptian calendar is one of the earliest examples of a purely solar calendar. The Egyptians were skilled astronomers, and they noticed that the annual flooding of the Nile, which was crucial for their agriculture, coincided with the heliacal rising of the star Sirius. This observation helped them divide the year into 12 months, each 30 days long, with an additional 5 days at the end of the year for religious celebrations. This shift from lunar to solar calendars marked a profound change in how humans understood time. Lunar calendars, with their connection to the moon's phases, reflected the cycles of nature, the rhythms of growth, death, and rebirth that are seen in the seasons, the tides, and even in human life. In contrast, solar calendars began to impose a more fixed, linear structure onto time. The year became something predictable, repeatable, and controlled. Over time, the solar calendar became dominant in the Western world, particularly with the Roman adoption of the Julian calendar in 46 BCE. Julius Caesar reformed the Roman calendar, which was a chaotic blend of lunar and solar systems, by adopting a purely solar model based on the Egyptian calendar. He introduced the leap year to account for the extra quarter day that accumulates each year, bringing the calendar more in line with the solar year. Yet even this system wasn't perfect. By the 16th century, the Julian calendar had drifted out of sync with the actual solar year by about 10 days, leading to Pope Gregory XIII's introduction of the Gregorian calendar in 1582. The Gregorian calendar, which we still use today, fixed this problem by adjusting the leap year system. But this calendar, though accurate, represented something more than just an astronomical correction. It symbolized the final step in the human effort to impose order and control over time, a process that had begun thousands of years earlier. Why, though, does the number 12 dominate our system of time? From the 12 months of the year to the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 12 hours on a clock face, this number has a symbolic resonance that stretches back millennia. In many cultures, 12 is seen as a number of completeness and order. It divides easily into halves, thirds, and quarters, making it a useful number for organizing time. The ancient Babylonians, who developed one of the earliest systems of mathematics based on the number 60, divided the sky into 12 sections, each represented by a zodiac sign. This division of the heavens reflected their belief in a cosmic order, where the movements of the stars and planets influenced events on Earth. The Babylonians' 12-month lunar calendar, despite its inconsistencies with the solar year, became the foundation for later calendars. But the number 12 didn't just represent order, it also symbolized human control over time. By adopting a 12-month system, societies were able to standardize their calendars, making it easier to organize festivals, agriculture, and politics. This standardization was particularly important for empires like Rome, which needed a consistent system of timekeeping to govern vast territories. However, this shift towards a 12-month calendar also meant a departure from the natural cycles that had once governed human life. The moon, with its 13 cycles per year, was sidelined in favor of a system that prioritized efficiency and control over harmony with the natural world. And this brings us to the number 13, a number that has been both revered and feared throughout history. In ancient times, the number 13 was closely tied to the lunar calendar. As we mentioned earlier, the moon completes 13 cycles in a year, each cycle lasting roughly 28 days. Many early cultures, particularly those more attuned to nature, followed 13-month lunar calendars. These calendars were in sync with the cycles of the moon, the tides, and even the human body. After all, the average menstrual cycle is roughly 28 days, aligning women's biological rhythms with the moon. The Celts, for example, used a 13-month lunar calendar called the Coligny calendar. The Druids, who followed this system, believed that the cycles of the moon were connected to spiritual energy and transformation. Each month was associated with a sacred tree, and the calendar reflected not just the passage of time, but the rhythms of nature and the soul's journey through life. But as solar calendars became dominant, the number 13 was increasingly seen as a symbol of chaos and disorder. The lunar calendar, with its uneven alignment with the solar year, was considered unreliable and inefficient. The 12-month system became a symbol of human control over nature, while 13 was relegated to superstition and mystery. In many cultures, the number 13 came to be associated with bad luck. The fear of the number 13, known as triskaidekaphobia, is still prevalent today, with many buildings skipping the 13th floor and Friday the 13th being considered an unlucky day. But this fear may reflect something deeper, a cultural rejection of the chaotic, cyclical nature of time that the number 13 represents. By abandoning the 13-month lunar calendar, we may have lost something more profound than just an ancient timekeeping system. We may have severed our connection to the rhythms of the natural world, choosing instead to live by a system that prioritizes order and predictability over the fluid, cyclical nature of life. Calendars were never just about tracking time. They were deeply intertwined with mythology, religion, and cosmology. In many cultures, the calendar was seen as a reflection of the cosmic order, a way to harmonize human life with the movements of the stars, planets, and gods. In ancient Egypt, for example, the calendar was closely linked to the gods. The extra 5 days at the end of their 12-month year were known as the epigomenal days, and they were believed to be the days when the gods were born. These days were outside the regular flow of time, existing in a kind of liminal space, a pause between the end of one year and the beginning of the next. During this time, chaos reigned, and normal social rules were suspended. This reflects a worldview in which time was not just a mechanical progression, but something sacred and cyclical, marked by moments when the cosmic order was temporarily overturned. Similarly, in Mesoamerican cultures, particularly the Maya, calendars were tied to both time and destiny. The Mayan calendar system is one of the most complex and sophisticated in the world, consisting of several interlocking cycles. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day calendar, was used for divination and religious rituals, while the Hab, a 365-day calendar, governed agricultural and civil life. The combination of these two calendars formed a larger cycle known as the calendar round, which lasted 52 years. Every 52 years, the two calendars would align, and this period was seen as a time of cosmic renewal. For the Maya, time was not linear but cyclical, with each cycle representing a new era of creation and destruction. The famous long count calendar, which tracks periods of over 5,000 years, was used to record the ages of the universe. When one cycle ended, another began in an eternal process of regeneration. This cyclical view of time was mirrored in their mythology, where gods were often reborn or transformed, and the cosmos itself underwent repeated cycles of death and renewal. Even in ancient Greece, time had a dual nature. The Greeks distinguished between chronos, the linear quantitative time measured by calendars and clocks, and kairos, a more qualitative sense of time, referring to the right or opportune moment. In this sense, time wasn't just something to be measured and divided into neat segments. It had a deeper, more subjective meaning, tied to the rhythms of life and the unfolding of human events. As we've shifted from these ancient cyclical systems to the strictly linear, segmented system we use today, something fundamental has changed in our relationship with time. The calendar we use now, the Gregorian calendar, is a rigid, almost mechanical system. It divides time into months and years in a way that prioritizes efficiency and consistency, but it distances us from the natural rhythms of the Earth, the Moon, and the stars. In our modern world, time has become a commodity. We schedule every minute of our day, and any time that isn't productive is often seen as wasted. The clock dictates our lives, telling us when to work, when to rest, and even when to celebrate. We've created a system that is disconnected from the cycles of nature that once guided human life. The 24-hour clock, the 5-day workweek, and the 12-month calendar all reinforce a sense of time that is linear, unyielding, and entirely human-made. But what have we lost in the process? By abandoning the cyclical calendars of the past, we've lost a sense of connection to the natural world. In ancient times, time wasn't just something to be controlled, it was something to be lived in harmony with. The lunar months and solar years weren't arbitrary divisions. They reflected the natural cycles of life, death, and renewal. Festivals, agricultural practices, and even religious rituals were aligned with these cycles, creating a deep sense of unity between humanity and the cosmos. Today, we've replaced these rhythms with artificial constructs. The idea of time as a continuous linear progression from past to future dominates our culture. We measure progress in terms of economic growth, technological advancement, and individual achievement. But this linear view of time can also be limiting. It reinforces the idea that life is a race, with each moment slipping away into the past, never to return. We no longer see time as something cyclical, where the end of one phase is simply the beginning of another. What would it mean to reconnect with these ancient systems of timekeeping? Could we live in a way that's more attuned to the natural cycles of the world, rather than the rigid structures of modern calendars? It's unlikely that we'll ever abandon the Gregorian calendar or the 24-hour clock. They are too embedded in our society and too practical for coordinating global economies and technologies. But that doesn't mean we can't find ways to bring a more cyclical, natural sense of time into our lives. One way we can do this is by paying attention to the cycles of nature. Many people are already doing this in subtle ways. Gardening according to the lunar cycle, celebrating solstices and equinoxes, or simply observing the changes in the seasons. These practices help to remind us that time is not just something that happens on a clock or a calendar. It's something that unfolds in the world around us. Another approach is to rethink how we structure our days. Instead of trying to squeeze every minute for productivity, we can allow for periods of rest and renewal. In many ancient cultures, time wasn't divided into work and leisure the way it is now. There were times for planting, times for harvesting, and times for celebration. But these rhythms were fluid, reflecting the natural cycles of life. By embracing a more flexible approach to time, we might find that we are more in tune with both ourselves and the world around us. There's also a philosophical lesson to be learned from the ancient understanding of time. The idea that time is cyclical, that it doesn't just move in one direction but can return, regenerate, and renew, offers a different perspective on life. Instead of seeing time as something that is always slipping away, we can view it as something that is constantly unfolding, with each moment containing the potential for renewal. By rediscovering the ancient calendars and the wisdom they represent, we might begin to see time not as a force that controls us, but as a rhythm that we can live in harmony with. Perhaps by looking back to the past, we can find a new way of living in the present, one that is more connected, more mindful, and more attuned to the natural cycles of life. The way we measure time shapes our perception of reality. By moving away from the cyclical, nature-based systems of our ancestors, we've created a world that is fast-paced, linear, and often disconnected from the rhythms of nature. But by revisiting the ancient calendars, we might find a deeper understanding of time, one that is not just about the ticking of a clock or the turning of a page, but about the cycles of life, death, and renewal that have always guided human existence. In the end, time is both universal and deeply personal. It connects us to the cosmos, to each other, and to ourselves. And perhaps by rediscovering the forgotten rhythms of ancient calendars, we can find a way to live in harmony with time once again.